Welcome to the March edition of the Behaviour Matters webinar. The topic for today is communicating in a hybrid world. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle McArthur-Morgan, and I'm the founding partner and creator of the Jigsaw Discovery Tool. And for the last 20 plus years now, my background really has been working with psychology and neuroscience, looking at the latest research findings and then applying that into the world of work. I'm also a mindfulness practitioner. I've had my own mindfulness practice now for over 30 years. So in today's ever-increasing remote and hybrid world, communicating effectively has never been more important. When managers and their teams are separated by distance, building and maintaining trust can be even more challenging. And those are all important and often critical conversations regarding performance, engagement, or even just individual check-ins can be so much harder and even overlooked when people are co-located. And especially if we add into that mix, the fact that now for many people, we're working more flexible hours. We're going to start by exploring the question of whether communicating in a hybrid world requires a whole new skill set, or is it time just to refine and enhance our existing communication skills within the situational context of the hybrid and remote workplace? During the webinar, we're also going to discuss building trust and creating engagement in a hybrid world, making a true connection with your communication, and latterly looking at some of the new, what we know now to be called digital body language, and avoiding some of the common pitfalls. Communication is a subject which has fascinated me for many, many years. Why is it when we start communicating from birth, perhaps even before birth sometimes, do so many of us get it so wrong, even with the decades of practice that many of us have had? All too often, I'm invited into a business to help resolve issues with customer service, poor teamwork, poor relationships, low levels of engagement and motivation, ineffective managers, and so the list goes on. Yet when I start asking the right questions and get down to the root cause of the issues, in a large number of instances, it comes down to ineffective or poor communication. In today's digital and hybrid world, the way we communicate has changed dramatically. More and more communication is reliant on technology, and our ability to effectively communicate has never been so critical. Just kind of take a moment to reflect and think about the way you and your colleagues communicate. How has it changed over the last couple of years? Think about the frequency and the ways that you now choose to communicate. How have they changed? The choices we make affect how we build, retain, and grow relationships, and how effectively we are as leaders. In addition, we also now need to think about how we engage with different generations, as there are now so many more ways to get our message out there. And whilst digital transformation has potentially enhanced the way we communicate, it's also not without its challenges. We've lost so much of that rich, non-verbal communication, which helped us to convey our individuals, our emotions and thoughts, and gives valuable insights into what is really going on, the real context and meaning of the situation, of the communication. So, is it time for a new communication skill set? Just want to start by just thinking about, what are the skills required to be an effective communicator? What would be some of the things that would spring to your mind to become an effective communicator? Well, some of the things: listening actively with an open mind, not making any judgments, being non-judgmental, showing an understanding of the other party's situation, what it is that's going on for them, from their perspective. And then we need to show compassion for what they're experiencing. We need to be patient, not jump in and try to fill those awkward silences. Provide time for the other party to think and to speak, to show respect for the opinions of others, to be respectful of other people's preferred communication preferences. And we need to present clarity around the message. Putting it simply, these days, we don't talk the talk. We are far more likely to write the talk. Upwards of 70% of communication is now digital, meaning that we have to find ways of enabling our leaders, our managers, our team members to be better communicators. It's not that we need to think in terms of learning whole new skill sets, but we need to build on and enhance our existing skills. We need to really fine-tune our communication skills. In a world where the majority of communication is digital and potentially lacking in empathy and context that we've previously taken from those non-verbal body language signals that we're likely to see, then what we tend to find is that innovative behaviours drop. Trust declines, relationships aren't as strong. Organisational commitment and personal satisfaction can drop by up to 50%. And especially when we put all of that into the context of the past 2 years, which has left so many people feeling overwhelmed and anxious, burnt out, running on empty, as somebody said to me the other day. And is there any wonder, not only are we surrounded with uncertainty and we continue to live in such volatile times, but we've also got to cope with an enormous increase in data and information. According to the Neuro Leadership Institute, we're amidst a flood of noise. According to research that was quoted a few weeks ago at the Neuro Leadership Institute Summit, the volume of data has increased from just 2 zettabytes in 2010. Now I'm told that a zettabyte is approximately 1 trillion gigabytes. So it was just 2 zettabytes in 2010 to 97 zettabytes in 2022. And that figure is actually likely to increase up to 181 zettabytes within the next 3 years. The volume of data that we're all having to manage is growing exponentially, all of which is taking its toll on our brains, on our health, and ultimately will affect our ability to perform. Last year, it's thought that our cognitive flexibility has decreased by as much as 10%, and the processing speed of our brains has slowed by as much as 32%. The pandemic might be easing a little, but there's still tough times ahead with the conflict that's going on between Ukraine and Russia. And all of this is happening at a time when we really all need to be on our A game. So for leaders and managers, this is a major issue, and we need to find ways of helping people to express what they mean with clarity and to fully understand what other people mean and what other people need and want when communicating. We need to find ways of communicating effectively within the context of the hybrid world. We need to find ways of reducing potential misunderstanding and frustrations, and ensuring that we don't add unnecessary noise to an already overwhelmingly noisy world. We need to find ways of being succinct, specific, but whilst remaining generous in our communication, bringing a balance between conversational whilst being direct and delivering information just in time so that we don't overload and add to the overload that people are already experiencing. Dr. David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute says, be essential, not exhaustive. Be essential, not exhaustive. So I'm just ask you to take a moment for reflection, really, to think about how your leaders and managers, how you yourself are doing, but being succinct and specific, essential, not exhaustive. Are you and your managers adding to that already overwhelming noise that team members are having to manage? You might just want to pause the recording here, just to take a few moments for that quiet reflection. There are 3 areas of focus for communication to be effective. Setting norms and expectations, predictability, giving people some certainty. Mediating distance and maintaining connection. Building and maintaining high levels of trust. Today, we're going to take a brief look at each of these areas. So let's start by norms, expectations, and predictability, which hopefully by now, leaders within your organisation will have clarified many of the norms and expectations for team members around hybrid and the flexible working world that we're in. Here are just a few of the areas that hopefully leaders have now provided that clarity around. However, if clarity has not been provided around these points that you're now seeing on screen, for all employees, communication processes are not being as effective as they need to be. And that will lead to increased uncertainty, which then goes on to lead to increased anxiety and stress, and ultimately will affect the health of employees and their overall performance. Managers and leaders have a responsibility to provide as much certainty and predictability as they can for their people. Team members need to hear from the leaders as to what is going on. They need to know when to expect communications and the format those communications will take. Managers should be modelling the communication standards and expectations because it's the managers that set the tone, and the predictability cascading consistent communication, which reinforces the priorities and provides the support team members so desperately need at the moment. So again, you might want to stop the recording here and take a couple of moments to reflect on how well your organisation at setting some of those norms and expectations. Just thinking about all employees across the business at all levels of the business and different business areas. Do they all know those norms, what their expectations are? Now I want to move on to look at mediating distance. An effective communication is more than transactional interactions. It's about meaningful exchanges where ideas are exchanged, risks can be taken, and there's respect for one another. And those differences are valued and appreciated. Those differences of opinions, they're not perceived as conflict, they're actually valued and welcomed, actively encouraged. If we think about the types of communication which take place in the workplace, there are those formal team and individual communications, meetings, one-to-one, which yes, are usually work-based conversations. But there's also those informal team and individual conversations, often known as the water cooler chats. And these are not so work focused. They tend to be more relationship based conversations. But these conversations are often spontaneous and not planned. They just spark up, they just happen. Sometimes they're considered as not being that important, and some organizations actively frown upon them. Yet they're key to going beyond those kind of transactional conversations. They're key to building trust, key to building relationships and teamwork. In a hybrid world, those all-important relationship-based, spontaneous conversations don't occur easily. But why not? Well, obviously, there's a physical distance when people are not co-located. They can't just turn to a colleague or meet in the kitchen as they make a coffee. But it's not all about physical distance. There are other types of distance which create barriers. Operational distance. How do you go about getting things done? Those shared communication tools and platforms. Affinity distance. This is the one that really interests me, the degree of relational and human connectivity. There are real costs to pay if we fail to manage distance and human connectivity. And just a few of those costs. Innovative behaviours fall by up to 90%. And this is at a time when we're needing all our innovative skills and resources. Trust decreases by over 80%. Cooperation and helping behaviours decrease by up to 80%. Role and goal clarity can decrease by as much as 75%. Project success drops by over 50%. And organisational commitment and satisfaction decreases by more than 50%. Now, this was research which was presented at the Association of Talent Development virtual conference back in 2020. So here are just a few of the things that you can do about that will help to mediate distance and connect people to each other and the organisation, helping to form that kind of shared context that we so desperately need. Increase social connections. So encourage team members to perhaps meet up for a walk at lunchtime, to pick up the phone and check in with a colleague on a personal basis, to be more spontaneous. Try showcasing team members' contributions, perhaps using at team meetings or the intranet or bulletins, for example. Promote a sense of community and teamwork. Buddy up team members, especially when some team members have perhaps returned to the office full time, others have perhaps opted to work from home. Buddy them up. One person with the office buddies up with somebody who's working for home. Have project launch events where everyone comes together for the beginning of a project. Humanise team members, build individual and team self-awareness and awareness of others, and appreciation of the real diversity within the team. You could organise quarterly face-to-face get-togethers just with the aim of building and strengthening relationships. So let's just take another moment for reflection on how well your organisation is doing at mitigating distance to encourage the building of stronger relationships and that sense of belonging and inclusion. Again, please pause the recording for a moment to allow yourself some quiet time for reflection. Building and maintaining trust. The third area I mentioned for effective communication was that building and maintaining high levels of trust, which is a whole webinar in itself. So I will just say that the lack of trust by not paying attention to the quality of communication. So lack of trust begins by not paying that attention. to delivering quality, highly effective communication. High quality communication is linked to higher levels of trust, team performance, and productivity. More than ever, your future clients, future customers, suppliers, as well as colleagues and managers want to have easy access to communicate with you and your organization. Get it wrong and it could be very costly. When talking about digital communication, it would be remiss not to touch on the generational impact on communication. And most importantly, the need to be flexible and adaptable with your chosen communication channels and platforms. For example, do you know which social media tools your clients or future clients use? Baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, post-millennials, all have different digital preferences. For instance, Generation X tend to use Facebook, while millennials prefer Instagram and Snapchat. Not only that, but different ways of communicating and engaging with one another. For example, the advent of emojis and text language. Now, certainly for baby boomers and Generation X, this is a very different and new way of communicating, and one that can take some getting used to. The 17th of July, 2022. It's a special day. It's a World Day. Believe it or not, it's World Emoji Day. Now, whilst not everyone agrees with the use of emojis and slang in a business setting, it is important to have an awareness of the different generational groups, preferences, and expectations. Different generational groups like to receive and give information differently. For example, millennials use sound bites and acronyms. The key is not to communicate in your preferred way, on your preferred platform, or in your preferred language and style, but in the preference of the receivers. Communication needs to be humanized and personal. Having thought about the type of communication and choosing the appropriate platform, the next thing I'd like to speak about is the actual language and communication preferences. There is a great tendency for us to communicate in our own preferred style, and especially so when under pressure or feeling stressed, as many people are at the moment. The golden rule of communication that I talk about in all our Jigsaw Discovery experiences is don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Tailor your communications to the receiver of the sender. Now, I remember when I first started out in life being told you should always treat people the way you would expect to be treated yourself. But I'm saying forget that golden rule and don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Don't communicate to people the way you want to be communicated. Communicate in the way the receiver prefers to be communicated in. The Jigsaw Discovery tool, we identifies 4 root behavioural style, and each one has their preferred style or preference for communication. So I'm just going to give you a quick kind of overview of these 4 different communication styles. So our first style we call the ever ready, and when we're communicating with an ever ready, there's on screen you can see some of the do's and don'ts. So we need to be clear, direct, to the point. I always suggest thinking in bullet points and delivering it in bullet points. Stick to the business. Don't get over personal. Don't ramble on. With our ray of sunshine preference, then for them it's important that we actually keep drawing them back to the conversation topic, that we keep involving them. We ask them questions and we'll build in time for them to go off topic. We provide options, don't give our opinions. We're not too pushy. We don't do too much talking. We do much more listening. With our carer preference, then it's all about building a relationship through the communication before we get down to the business. We need to have a warm, soft, social kind of opening. We need to not be over demanding. Don't sell or tell. Don't put them on the spot. Clearly define your expectations. Give them time to ask questions. Give them time to think things through. And with our last communication preference style, Mr. Huey Blue. Mr. Huey Blue is all about attention to detail. They expect a logical, sequential type of communication where all the detail is available. They want you to stick to the business. They actually like advance notice. They like written communication as above spoken communication. They want accuracy of information. Don't want any ambiguity in there. They want clear, accurate, detailed information. And if we just have a look at how this actually plays out in reality, this is the same email written to somebody who's got a red, a yellow, a green, and a blue preference. Now, in actual fact, I ran out of space on the slide. Otherwise, the blue one would have been much, much longer. So you can see the difference that it really makes by understanding those different communication styles. Now, I'm a great ever ready. That is my preference. If I received the bottom email, the one that's intended for the Huey Blue preference, I wouldn't read it. The detail has got lost in that to me. All I need to see is, I've got the tickets, see you at the gates at 8. That's all I need to know, where and when. I don't need all the other detail. So we've now looked at the types of communication, the importance of mediating distance, setting norms and expectations, those generational differences, and now the different styles of communication based on behavioural preferences. So I want to just kind of move on to the last chapter and start looking at digital body language. How many times have you had an instant negative reaction to an email or a text? But what if you were misreading the digital communication? Or worse still, what if the recipient of one of your emails were misreading your digital communication? If you're an employee, a team member, manager, you know that it's becoming increasingly difficult to express what we actually mean in the modern digital electronic world. Likewise, it's also challenging to fully grasp what other people actually are meaning, their true meaning, what their real need or want is. We all know about that importance of non-verbal communication to help us interpret the meaning. When someone is talking, we take note of their body language, their tone of voice, their facial expressions, their eye contact. So, as we cannot assume every workplace interaction will be in person nowadays, it's critical to learn how to access the new signals of what is known as digital body language and find better ways to connect. So, what digital body language signals are sending in your messages? What are they? I'm talking about signals like your word choices, the response time to a message, how quickly you receive a response, your email signature, what does that look like? Who you CC, forward, BCC, on your emails. The order even of the email recipients on an email can actually say a lot and be very important and wrongly misunderstood. Switching from one medium to another, platform to platform. The use of punctuation, abbreviations, emojis, and many, many more. One of my clients recently told me about how she'd sent an email to her manager, and it got some ideas and suggestions about the project they were working on. The email contained a couple of questions that she needed some clarification on. It took until 4 p.m. the following day before she received an email back. And when she opened it up, it quite simply read, yes. Yes to what? To all of it? What about the information she'd asked for clarity on? Why had it taken so long to get some sort of response? And most importantly, what should she do now? This is just a simple example of the importance of the new signals in digital body language. There are no hard and fast rules to digital body language, but there are some questions you can ask yourself that will help you to understand and use digital body language signals more effectively. So, did I give the other person enough context in my message? Is it clear by my digital body language signals? Context requires us to use those signals carefully. Am I using the right emotional tone in my digital body language? Am I trying to show gratitude, respect, alignment, or frustration in my communications? How can I use those new signals like question marks, exclamations to show emotion in the right way? Am I showing a clear call to action or next steps? Does the recipient know if this is an opinion or an action request? And is it actually clear what to do next? One of the things we must always do is, when sending even the briefest of messages, remember to carefully read and write any communication before you send it. And likewise, read it carefully when receiving it. The average office worker receives 121 emails and responds to over 61 emails every day. In this new culture of communicating quickly, sometimes we take shortcuts or completely leave out context altogether in our messages because we know the context, it's very clear in our head, but we sometimes fail to communicate that. And a lot of times these brief messages cause confusion, misunderstanding or frustration, and could easily lead to damaging a relationship with a colleague or even a client. So a key skill when using digital body language is never confuse a brief message with a clear message. Receiving an email from your boss that simply reads, "We should talk," could have multiple interpretations. One-word responses like fine, sure, okay, yes, can also cause uncertainty. Even sending just multiple question marks instead of actually asking your team a question doesn't make the information clearer to either party. The recipient could quite easily jump to negative conclusions. So here are just a few questions to ask yourself to create that culture of clarity instead of brevity with your teammates. Am I being clear enough about what I need? Always take a moment to provide important background needed for the recipient. Remember, just because you know it, the other person may not know it. Did I include the right people in my email? Is it clear why this message is meaningful to the person or the group of people? It's sometimes easy to be so brief that others don't even really understand why they need to respond. Am I intentional about when and what I expect in my response? Have I allowed enough time for a response. One way to avoid brevity, confusion when we're being brief, is to create clear acronyms for your team. So, for example, NNTR means no need to respond. Put NNTR in an email. So long as that acronym is understood and known by your team, it's a way of creating brevity, but still being clear. A 4H in the subject line means this is in 4 hours. Or a 2D means I need this in 2 days. Remember that while a brief email may be convenient for you, it can have that negative impact on the person receiving it. And that can cause anxiety and time wasting as the other people are trying to interpret the message instead of actually taking action and acting on them. In our daily communications, we get messages like this one all the time. What does that mean? Now, is that a simple question? Or is it actually accusing the person of something? We need to talk. Is it as ominous as it sounds? Or is it just a simple meeting request? Can you send me this today? Is the all caps implying frustration, or was it just due to fast texting? Communicating in our times is challenging, but having compassion for ourselves and others can help us to remember the human and assume the best intent first. Have you ever been waiting for a response from a colleague and they've taken an absolute age to get back to you? It's very easy to assume that they can't be bothered or they're just ignoring you. And then at a later stage, it actually came out that they'd been waiting for somebody else to get back to them before they responded to you. So give people the benefit of the doubt. Think about why they may have made a communication mistake, why they may be taking a while to respond. Were they under pressure? Or did they think that a simple message wouldn't be offensive to you? I recently received a "just do it" response from a colleague. Now, I didn't find that offensive at all because that's very much my style, and we both understood each other. However, when I mentioned it to a colleague, they became highly offended by it. And I had to explain why I wasn't. But ultimately, if I hadn't been aware of the sender's style and them aware of my preference, it could have been a very different outcome. I could have been very offended and annoyed by that communication. The thing we have to remember is people sometimes make these mistakes and they don't even realize they're doing it. And this is why it's so important that we come back to that. And now is the time to really hone our communication skills, to upgrade them, to enhance them, to build on our existing communication skills. Communicating your authentic feelings isn't as easy as we think in digital communication. Here are a few of the most effective and digital body language signals to communicate your feelings. So, exclamation marks, they can convey urgency, excitement, or even shouting. One exclamation mark portrays human warmth, mirroring the tone of the other person. 2 is excitement. 3 is enthusiasm. 4, now that could just be sarcasm or wit. The full stops, multiple full stops. Does it mean something is unfinished, or it could possibly signal anger or insincerity? Question marks. 1 question mark is a genuine question or interest. 2 is portraying confusion. 3, frustration. 4, anger. What are you getting at? Emojis are possibly one of the most powerful cues of tone in our voice or message. But as I said earlier, some people don't approve of them and would very much frown on them if they receive them in a business communication. So being conscious of your emotional tone in your message will lead to improved communication and collaboration with your colleagues within your team. We should also be aware that digital communication provides anyone who wants to mask their anger in passive aggression the perfect medium. I mean, how could you interpret, or how would you interpret the two messages on screen? What does someone really mean when they type, as per my last email? Is it just a gentle reminder? Are they really saying you didn't read what I wrote? Pay more attention. Get this done. It's late. I'm waiting. What is the intention? So think about when you're writing your emails, when you're using digital communication, think about how will this communication, this message be interpreted by the receiver? Make sure you ask yourself those questions I went through earlier, that checklist. So in summary, 6 top tips for communicating in a hybrid world are: understand the power dynamics and trust levels of your audience. Always ask, what is the likely positive intent of this message, if you're in any doubt at all. When receiving messages that are brief and confusing from others, ask for clarity. Probe on what they specifically need, such as whether the response time matters or if there's information that you might be missing. Use the right communication channel. Communicate your feelings and emotions. Remember that each channel and language that you use implies different priorities and levels of importance. Learn from your responses over time. If you get a difficult response back, go through your communication that you sent out prior. Try to always see from another's perspective and learn their behaviours to choose the best way that you can communicate for them. What are their communication preferences? And last but not least, create digital body language norms on your team to reduce confusion and form clarity. Those 4 H's, for example, those acronyms. Make sure rules, as you know, people know when to email versus when to text, when you can use the mute button or not, when to call out poor email behavior. These are all the kind of general rules that you can establish and agree within your team to help for that clarity in communication. The starting point for improving the effectiveness of communication in the world today is, first of all, we need to create space. Leaders need to create some space for themselves. First of all, they need to reduce the noise in their world, which will help them to optimize brain performance. And in turn, they will be in a better place to then amplify their communication signals and be more effective communicators. So it all starts by space, creating the space that we need to optimize our own brain performance so that we can be a more effective communicator. That brings us towards the end of the whirlwind tour, shall I say, of communicating in a hybrid world. And all we've really done is just scratch the surface of such a vast subject. I hope you found it insightful, helpful, a few hints and tips there that will help you in the future. If you would like to find out any more about our communication learning experiences, please just get in touch. Thank you, and until next time, goodbye.